Hey man, here's the truth. Most guys don't realize until they've lived it. The moment you stop texting first, everything changes. It's not about playing games, it's not about manipulation, and it's definitely not about pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming your energy. Because for too long, you've been pouring yourself into one-sided connections, carrying the weight of every conversation, trying to keep something alive that would have died a long time ago if it weren't for your effort. When you stop texting first, you stop chasing validation. You stop feeding into the illusion that your attention is what keeps her interested. You start to realize that if someone needs you to chase them to keep them around, they were never really with you in the first place. Silence reveals more than words ever could. It exposes who truly values you and who only valued your effort. At first, it feels strange. You're used to being the one who initiates. You wake up and instinctively check your phone, waiting for that message that never comes. You start to wonder if she even noticed your absence, if she's already moved on, if she even cares. But here's the thing, that discomfort you feel, that's not loss, that's detox. You're breaking free from emotional dependency. You're realizing how much of your peace you sacrificed, trying to maintain something that wasn't mutual. When you stop texting first, you start to see the imbalance for what it really was. You notice how one-sided things had become, how you were always the one making the effort while she simply responded. You were building connection out of hope. She was feeding on your initiative. Now that you've withdrawn your energy, the silence feels uncomfortable, but it's the kind of silence that transforms you. And then something interesting happens. Days pass, and you begin to notice that your mind feels lighter. You're no longer anxiously waiting for replies that used to dictate your mood. You start to think about her less. You start focusing on your own life again. Your goals, your plans, your peace. You realize how much mental space you were giving to someone who barely gave you theirs. That's the real shift, because when you stop texting first, you're not just creating silence between you and her, you're creating space between you and your old self, the version of you that needed constant reassurance to feel valuable. You're stepping into emotional independence, and that's when everything begins to turn in your favor. You start to realize that your attention is a currency, and the more you give it away freely, the less it's worth. But the moment you protect it, people start valuing it. Now let's talk about her reaction, because this is where it gets real. When you stop texting first, women notice. Even if they act like they don't, they feel it. The energy shift is instant. The man who used to flood her with attention suddenly goes quiet. The validation she once took for granted vanishes. At first, she might think you're just busy. She'll tell herself you're playing games. But deep down, she starts to wonder if you've lost interest, and that thought bothers her. Why? Because the feminine mind thrives on emotional feedback. When you used to text her first, you provided that. You gave her comfort, certainty, attention, all things that feed a woman's ego. But now she feels the void. She starts overanalyzing the silence. She starts replaying old conversations, checking if she said something wrong. And slowly, without realizing it, the balance of power begins to shift. You see, most women are used to being pursued. They're used to men competing for their attention, flooding their DMs, constantly trying to prove their worth. So when you stop texting first, you break the pattern. You introduce uncertainty into a space where she once felt control, and uncertainty is what triggers emotional curiosity. She starts wondering what changed. Did you meet someone else? Did you lose interest? Did you finally realize your worth? The silence becomes louder than any message you could have sent, because silence, when used correctly, creates presence. It makes people feel your absence, and once a woman starts feeling your absence, she starts to remember your value. Your words used to fill her screen, but now your silence fills her thoughts. That's when the tables turn, not because you're trying to manipulate her, but because you finally stopped undervaluing yourself. There's something incredibly powerful about a man who's comfortable not reaching out. It shows emotional discipline. It shows that he's not driven by impulse, but by intention. Most men crumble under silence. They can't handle the unknown. They break no contact. They send that just checking in text, and the cycle repeats. But the man who can stay silent when everything in him wants to reach out, that man has mastered self-control. He understands that attraction is built through tension, not constant availability. He knows that distance creates desire. Every second you resist the urge to text her, you strengthen your emotional muscles. You remind yourself that peace is better than forced connection. And when you get to that point, when silence feels more powerful than chasing, you've crossed a line most men never reach. You've learned emotional detachment. You've learned that attention is not love, it's leverage. But here's the twist. Most men never see coming. When you stop texting first, the right woman will reach out. Not because she's desperate, but because she values you. She'll notice the effort you used to put in, the presence you used to offer, and she'll feel the difference. Real women appreciate consistency, but they also respect boundaries. When you stop initiating, the wrong ones vanish, the fake ones get irritated, and the right ones step up. That's the beauty of it. Silence filters faster than words ever could. You won't have to argue, explain, or prove anything. You'll just watch who stays and who fades. The ones who truly care will match your energy. The ones who never did will move on to find their next source of attention. And when that happens, you'll realize something profound. You never lost anything by going silent. You only lost what was draining you. Of course, your ego will fight this at first. It'll whisper lies, she'll forget you, you're losing her. Just text once, it won't hurt. But that's your emotional addiction talking, not your intuition. Because the truth is, if she forgets you that easily, she was never truly invested. You were just a placeholder, a source of comfort. But if she feels your absence, if she starts mirroring your silence, if she starts chasing what once chased her, that's when you see the truth about attraction. Women don't fall for men who are always available. They fall for men who are consistent but selective, loving but detached. The moment you stop chasing, she starts wondering. The moment you stop texting first, she starts feeling. An emotional feeling is the foundation of attraction. She might resist it at first, but soon that silence will echo louder than any words. Eventually you'll notice how peaceful it feels. No overthinking, no constant checking, no emotional roller coaster tied to her replies. You'll realize that what you once called connection was really dependency. You'll understand that the relationship was never mutual, it was maintained by your effort. But when you stop texting first, you give her the chance to meet you halfway. You give her space to show her level of interest without interference. And most importantly, you give yourself space to breathe, to focus on what matters, to rebuild your sense of worth independent of her attention. That's the part most men miss. Silence isn't just a tactic, it's healing. It's how you reset your emotional balance and remind yourself that you were whole before she ever replied. And the irony is, when you finally stop needing her to respond, that's when she'll want to the most. So here's the truth, man. When you stop texting first, everything changes. You stop being predictable. You stop being the emotional safety net she leans on whenever she's bored or lonely. You reclaim your mystery, your presence, your peace. You teach her, and yourself, that you are not afraid of silence. You no longer beg for her attention. You command it through absence, because silence isn't weakness, it's strength under control. The kind of strength that only men who've been broken and rebuilt understand. You're not ignoring her to hurt her. You're respecting yourself enough not to chase someone who doesn't reciprocate. And that shift, that quiet, grounded confidence, changes everything. You become the man who doesn't text first because he doesn't need to. Because he's finally realized that when something is real, it won't need to be chased. It'll stay because it wants to. As the silence continues, something fascinating begins to unfold. She starts to notice things she never paid attention to before. The way you used to message her good morning without fail, the way you check in after a long day, the way you seem to genuinely care when others didn't. Those small acts of consistency, which once felt ordinary, now haunt her because they've disappeared. The absence of your words begins to feel heavier than their presence ever did. You see, when you stop texting first, you don't just remove communication, you remove emotional oxygen. You take away the constant reassurance she used to get from your effort. And when a woman realizes that attention wasn't guaranteed, that it had value, she starts to crave it again. But now it's different. She's the one replaying old conversations, wondering if she misread your energy, asking herself, did I lose him? That uncertainty, that shift in emotional control is what makes her feel your worth without you saying a word. You'll know this phase has begun when she subtly tries to re-enter your space. Maybe she views your story after days of silence. Maybe she likes an old post. Maybe she sends something trivial like, "This reminded me of you." It's not random, it's a temperature check. She's testing to see if you'll still respond the way you used to. But this time, you don't. You're calm, you're composed. You're no longer the man waiting for a response. You've become the man who decides if it's worth replying. That's the silent power shift that happens when you stop texting first. The same woman who once seemed unavailable suddenly starts seeking small ways to regain your attention. And what's beautiful about it is that you're not even trying. You've detached. You're living your life. You've stopped seeking closure and started giving yourself peace. That kind of indifference is magnetic because it's not feigned, it's earned. The truth is, silence forces reflection, not just for her, but for you too. You start to see patterns you missed before. You realize how many times you accepted breadcrumbs, how many times you mistook convenience for connection. You see how you used to carry the emotional labor of two people, trying to keep conversations alive while she gave minimal effort. That's when a quiet sense of pride replaces your need for her response. Because now you know that real love doesn't need chasing, it flows naturally, and if it doesn't, you let it go. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop mistaking unavailability for mystery. You understand that no woman who truly values you will ever let you feel like an option. And once that realization sinks in, you can never unsee it. You walk differently, you text differently, you carry yourself like a man who knows that attention is earned, not begged for. She feels that too, that change in your energy. Your texts used to have emotion, urgency, warmth. Now even if you respond, they carry something she can't quite define. Distance. It's not coldness, it's control. You're not giving her the same emotional access she once had. And that's what makes her anxious. Because emotional access is what women crave most, it's what makes them feel significant. When she loses that access, it's not just that you stop texting, it's that she no longer feels like she matters in your world. And that loss, that invisible rejection, hits deeper than any argument or goodbye ever could. She starts comparing you to other men again, realizing that no one texts her with the same depth, no one listens with the same patience, no one matches your energy, but it's too late now. You've learned the lesson most men never learn. Once you stop chasing, you see who's truly chasing you. But let's be honest, this stage isn't easy. There are days when your silence feels like self-sabotage, when you catch yourself wondering if you pushed her away, if maybe she's moved on, if perhaps she's happier now without you. That's when the test begins. Because silence isn't just a weapon, it's a mirror. It shows you where your emotional control truly stands. You'll feel the urge to reach out, to fix what's broken, to prove you're still present. But if you can hold the line, if you can resist that pull, something incredible happens. You start to realize that you were never addicted to her. You were addicted to the feeling of being needed. And when you can detach from that, you become untouchable. You no longer operate from scarcity. You understand that your worth doesn't depend on who texts you back. It depends on who you are when no one does. And that's when your silence evolves from a reaction to a lifestyle. You start applying it everywhere. In friendships, in work, in dating. You stop explaining yourself to people who misunderstand you. You stop chasing connections that don't feel reciprocal. You stop over-investing in anyone who doesn't meet your energy halfway. You learn that peace isn't found in constant communication. It's found in selective communication. You realize that the most powerful men are those who can love deeply yet remain detached enough to walk away when love isn't respected. That's what makes your silence terrifying. Not because it's cruel, but because it's final. It's the sound of a man who no longer needs validation to feel alive. It's the silence that says, I'm not angry, I'm not hurt, I'm just done explaining my value. And that silence, that emotional maturity, speaks louder than any message you could ever send. Over time, people begin to notice your transformation. You move with calm confidence, and your energy feels lighter. You're no longer drained by overthinking or emotional exhaustion. You've learned how to live without needing constant updates, and that independence becomes your superpower. You're not cold, you're self-contained. You can love someone and still be okay if they walk away. You can care deeply, but refuse to beg. And that balance, that calm strength, makes you magnetic. Because emotional self-control is rare in a world addicted to attention. The man who doesn't need to text first is the man who doesn't need external validation. He texts because he wants to, not because he has to. And women feel that difference instantly. They sense when a man is grounded, when his silence isn't manipulation but mastery. That's the kind of energy that shifts dynamics without saying a word. And here's where it gets even more profound. When you stop texting first, you learn to value yourself through actions, not attention. You start investing that energy back into your purpose, your fitness, your career, your peace. You start becoming the man you were always meant to be before you got lost in seeking emotional approval. You realize that chasing women doesn't build confidence. Self-improvement does. You no longer seek excitement through emotional drama. You seek fulfillment through progress. And the more you grow, the less tolerance you have for inconsistency. You look back at your old self, the one who would wait hours for a reply, who would double text out of insecurity, and you barely recognize him. Because the man you've become doesn't chase anymore, he attracts. He doesn't prove his worth, he embodies it. That's the difference. Silence creates, it rebuilds you from within. Of course, there will be moments when she resurfaces. Most of them will. Once she feels that your energy has shifted permanently, she'll test the waters again. It might be a late night message, a random check-in, or even a confession masked as curiosity. Hey, I've been thinking about you. And here's where the real power lies, in your response, or lack thereof. Because silence gave you clarity, but now it demands consistency. The way you handle her return determines whether you've truly learned the lesson. If she's genuine, you'll feel it. If she's just seeking validation, you'll see it. Either way, you'll respond with calm detachment, because you've learned that your peace is priceless. You're no longer chasing connection, you're filtering for alignment, and that's how silence turns into wisdom. It teaches you that not every knock at the door deserves to be answered. In the end, when you stop texting first, you don't just change how she sees you, you change how you see yourself. You stop being the man who overextends and start becoming the man who observes. You start trusting that what's real will stay, and what's not will fade without your effort. You stop fearing silence and start thriving in it. Because the truth is, the moment you stop chasing, the right energy begins to chase you. The moment you stop reaching out of fear, you start attracting out of strength. The man who doesn't text first isn't bitter, he's balanced. He's not cold, he's clear. He doesn't need to prove he cares, his calm shows it. And once you reach that point, you'll understand something most men never do. Silence isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of self-respect. When you've stayed silent long enough, something subtle but profound starts to happen. She begins to feel the loss, not just of your messages, but of your presence. The absence of your energy starts echoing in her day in ways she doesn't immediately understand. It hits her when she's scrolling through her phone late at night, when her notifications feel unusually quiet, when she catches herself typing your name and then deleting it. It hits her when she laughs at something and instinctively wants to share it with you, but then remembers she can't. That's when the silence becomes real. It's no longer about missing your words, it's about missing what your attention represented. Because your attention wasn't just digital noise, it was emotional investment. You made her feel special, seen, chosen, and when that disappears, she starts to feel ordinary again. The same woman who once thought she could take your effort for granted, now starts realizing just how rare that effort was. But while she's processing that loss, you're evolving. You're beginning to realize how much emotional power you gave away every time you reached out first. Every text you sent out of fear she'd forget you, fear she'd lose interest, was really a withdrawal from your self-worth account. Now, you're depositing back into it. Every day you remain silent, you're teaching your nervous system something new, that you don't need validation to feel secure. That silence doesn't mean rejection, it means control. You're retraining your mind to find comfort in patience, to find strength in restraint. You start living for your purpose again. The gym hits differently, your work flows better, your focus sharpens, because your mind isn't cluttered with emotional overthinking anymore. And as you rise, your energy transforms from needy to noble, from reactive to unshakable. That's when you start noticing women looking at you differently, not because of what you say, but because of what your silence radiates. Meanwhile, she's losing composure. At first, she might have told herself you were just busy. Then she thought you might have lost interest. Now, she's starting to wonder if she was the problem. That's the power of silence. It shifts her narrative from blaming you to questioning herself. Because women live through emotion, not logic. Your silence creates emotional tension, and that tension becomes curiosity. Why isn't he texting me? Has he moved on? Is he talking to someone else? Those questions start haunting her in quiet moments, and the irony is, the same silence that once scared you is now haunting her. She starts scrolling through your profile, watching your stories, waiting for a sign. But you've evolved past the need to signal. You're not performing anymore. You're not waiting for her reaction. You're living. That detachment, that focus, that peace, it makes you glow differently, and the more she sees it, the more her ego starts to crumble. The beauty of this transformation is that it happens naturally. You didn't manipulate her. You didn't play games. You just stopped feeding the imbalance. You stopped giving energy to something that didn't reciprocate. And in doing so, you restored emotional equilibrium. That's what women respond to most: balance. When you stop chasing, you stop making her your emotional center. You start prioritizing yourself again. You become the man who's selective with his energy, who doesn't need to fill every silence, who doesn't panic when things slow down. You've become rare, because in today's world, most men chase noise, but you've learned that quiet is your advantage. You've realized that peace is magnetic, because every time you didn't text her, you sent a silent message: I don't need you to complete me. And that's the one thing every woman respects, even if she never admits it. She can feel when a man has options, but she's terrified when he doesn't need any. Now, as her emotional confusion grows, her behavior begins to shift. She'll start testing the waters again. Maybe she'll post something that she knows will get your attention, or she'll casually bring up your name in mutual conversations, trying to provoke a response without directly reaching out. But you, grounded and centered, see through it all. You no longer react to the bait, because you understand something deeper now. Control isn't about power over others, it's about power over yourself. You've learned to delay gratification, to prioritize your emotional stability over fleeting excitement. You've realized that the man who can master silence masters attraction, because every woman is drawn to the man she can't completely read, the man whose presence she feels, but whose emotions she can't predict. You've become that man, and when she finally does reach out, it won't be out of habit, it'll be out of need. Because silence doesn't just make her miss you, it makes her realize she might have lost you. Here's the real twist though. By the time she finally reaches out, you're not the same man she left. You've grown past the phase of waiting for her to validate your worth. You no longer see her message as victory, you see it as clarity. You're not emotionally starving anymore, so you're not tempted by crumbs. That's the power of evolution. You stop confusing attention with affection. You start valuing depth over desire. When she finally breaks the silence, you won't feel the need to rush a response. You'll read it, feel nothing urgent, and calmly decide if it aligns with your peace. And that moment, that pause before you reply, is where all your growth is revealed. Because the old you would have jumped at the chance to reconnect, the new you, you've already reconnected with yourself. You've realized that peace tastes better than attention, and that silence has been your greatest teacher. She'll sense that difference immediately. She'll notice that your replies are fewer, your tone calmer, your attention harder to hold. And what confuses her most is that you're not cold, you're just composed. You're not angry, you're indifferent. You're not playing hard to get, you've simply outgrown the game. And that kind of energy is intoxicating, because women are drawn to mystery, not chaos. And mystery is what happens when a man no longer tries to prove his worth. She'll feel like she's meeting you for the first time again, only now, you're not the emotionally available man who needs her. You're the emotionally stable man who chooses her. If she's worth choosing, that shift terrifies and fascinates her, because now, for the first time, she realizes that you're not afraid to live without her. And the moment she realizes that, her desire for you transforms into respect. The silence changes you too. You start to notice how peaceful life feels without the emotional highs and lows of chasing. You notice how much more you accomplish when you're not glued to your phone, waiting for validation. You start building new habits, meditating, reading, working out, building your future. You start thriving in solitude, realizing that being alone isn't lonely when you're at peace with yourself. That internal stillness becomes visible. You walk differently, you speak slower, you make decisions with clarity. You've become a man who no longer moves out of fear. You move out of intention. And that kind of man doesn't chase attention because he's too focused on purpose. Ironically, that's what draws women back. They can feel when a man's attention has been redirected towards self-mastery. And while they may not say it, deep down, every woman wants to be part of that kind of man's world, not because he needs her, but because he doesn't. This is why silence, when done right, becomes your most powerful form of communication. It's not about ignoring her to punish her, it's about reminding her of your value through absence. It's about stepping back so that she can finally see the difference between attention and affection, between validation and connection. Silence teaches lessons words never could. It forces emotional accountability. It removes the illusion of control. Because the woman who once thought she could decide when you talk now realizes that she's not the one in control anymore, you are. And not because you're manipulating her, but because you've learned self-restraint. You've realized that true strength isn't in how much you can say, it's in how much you can hold back. Your silence has become sacred. It's no longer a tactic, it's a reflection of your inner peace. And when a man finds that peace, no woman can shake him again. Eventually, the silence comes full circle. You no longer think about who texts first or who replies last. You're beyond the games, beyond the ego battles, beyond the emotional tug-of-war. You've outgrown the need to prove anything. You've learned that connection built on chasing is temporary, but connection built on respect is eternal. The man who stops texting first learns the ultimate truth, that sometimes saying nothing is the loudest thing you can do, because silence forces people to confront the truth, who values you and who only values your effort. And in that truth, you find liberation. You stop needing her to realize your worth, because you already have. You don't chase her anymore because you're too busy walking toward your purpose. You've stopped being the man who texts first, and you've become the man who's remembered last. That's what happens when you master silence. You stop needing attention and start commanding it. As time stretches and your silence remains unbroken, something deeper begins to take root in her psyche, an unease she can't put into words. The stillness that once made her feel powerful now begins to feel like punishment. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because she's finally confronting the emptiness that your absence leaves behind. Every man she talks to feels dull in comparison. Every conversation feels shallow. The emotional rhythm she once took for granted has vanished. And now, every quiet moment becomes an echo of your restraint. She starts realizing something most women never admit. It wasn't your messages that made her feel desired. It was your consistency, your attention, your presence. Those little check-ins that she once dismissed as normal now feel like gold she squandered. Your silence becomes the mirror, reflecting her own indifference back at her. And that's the moment where her regret begins. You, on the other hand, have entered a state most men never reach. Calm detachment. You're not waiting for her to come back, but you're also not pushing her away. You've learned to exist in peace, not in resistance. You've learned that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means freeing yourself from emotional dependency. Every day you choose silence, you're reclaiming a part of yourself that you once gave away too easily. You're no longer chained to the outcome. You're rooted in your process. The more detached you become, the more grounded you feel. And this grounded energy, calm, quiet, self-assured, is something women can sense from miles away. It's that rare masculine stillness that draws them in without effort. You've stopped chasing her, but now she's chasing the feeling she once had when she was with you. And that's when the dynamic shifts permanently. You've become the one she can't get out of her head. At night, that's when it hits her hardest. When the noise dies down, when her phone isn't lighting up with messages, when her thoughts start looping in silence, that's when your absence feels the loudest. She replays the moments when you made her laugh, when you listened, when you cared without asking for anything back. And she realizes something brutal. She mistook your effort for weakness. She thought your consistency was desperation, but now she understands it was discipline, it was loyalty, it was depth, and she destroyed it trying to test how far you'd go for her. What she didn't realize is that every man has a breaking point, and yours was silence. You didn't yell, you didn't beg, you didn't demand, you just stopped talking. And that quiet decision, that unspoken boundary, is what now keeps her awake wondering, did I push away the one person who actually cared? That question eats at her more than any argument ever could. There's a reason silence works more powerfully than confrontation, because it doesn't give her something to fight against. It leaves her alone with her thoughts, and that's the one place she can't escape from. Every time she reaches for her phone and stops herself, every time she opens your chat and then closes it, she's wrestling with herself, her pride versus her desire. And the longer you remain silent, the louder that internal war becomes. She'll remember the way you used to make her feel calm, safe, seen. But she'll also remember how she took it for granted. And what haunts her most isn't that you stop talking, it's that she doesn't know if she'll ever get the same version of you again. Because she can feel it now, your energy has changed. Your silence isn't a phase, it's a transformation. You've outgrown needing to be understood by someone who never tried to. Meanwhile, your silence is reshaping everything about you. You're sharper now, not just mentally, but emotionally. You move slower, think clearer, and react less. You're not triggered by what used to bother you. You don't chase validation, you create value. You've learned that women are drawn to energy, not effort, and the more contained your energy becomes, the more they crave it. You've stopped scattering your focus across multiple people, and you've started investing it back into your purpose. You've realized that the greatest attraction you can create is not with words, but with progress. You've become so focused on becoming better that she feels your growth from afar. And the irony is, your silence has made you louder than ever, because now, your life speaks for you. You don't announce what you're doing anymore. You move quietly, and that quiet movement demands attention. That's what makes your absence unforgettable. It's filled with evolution. She'll start testing you again soon, subtly at first. Maybe she'll send a meme, maybe a simple hey, or something vague like I miss our talks. But what she's really saying is, I miss who I was when you gave me attention. That's the truth she won't admit. Because it's not about missing you, it's about missing the version of herself that felt desired, admired, secure. You represented emotional stability, and now that you've withdrawn it, she's chasing the equilibrium you used to provide. But you've learned something crucial. Every time you respond too soon, you reset the dynamic back to where it was, her leading, you chasing. So this time, you stay composed. You read the message, but you don't rush. You understand that not every I miss you means redemption. Sometimes it means reflection. And when you respond with patience instead of impulse, you remind her that she's dealing with a man, not a boy seeking approval. The beauty of this entire transformation lies in how silent growth changes everything around you. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to post motivational quotes or fake happiness online. You didn't need to make her jealous. You simply withdrew your energy, and that alone disrupted her entire emotional equilibrium. Because women are tuned into energy more than words. They feel when your presence has been removed, when your focus has shifted, when your attention no longer belongs to them. It's not about ignoring them. It's about redirecting your attention toward yourself. And that shift is powerful because it reclaims your narrative. You're no longer the guy who was waiting for her to choose you. You've become the man who chose himself. And that act alone, that quiet decision to focus inward, is what makes her start looking outward for what she already lost. Now she's in her overthinking phase, scrolling through your profile, rewatching your old stories, analyzing every sign of whether you've moved on. And the truth is, you have, not necessarily with someone new, but with yourself. You've found peace in solitude. You've realized that connection without reciprocity isn't love. It's emotional labor disguised as affection. You've stopped glorifying inconsistency. You've stopped mistaking attention for care. You've stopped waiting for closure because your silence became your closure. And as you keep growing, you notice how people, not just her, start reacting differently to you. You're respected more. You're heard more. Because you've learned to say less. That's the paradox of power. The quieter you become, the more people listen. And for her, that silence has become unbearable because deep down, she knows you were never the problem. You were the lesson. In the end, your silence teaches her the truth she tried to ignore. That love without effort fades, that attention isn't infinite, and that the men who love deeply are the ones who can also walk away quietly. She'll remember your name long after others fade. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. Because you didn't beg, didn't explain, didn't chase, you just disappeared with dignity. That's the kind of memory that doesn't go away. She might move on, date new people, fill her life with distractions, but none of it will erase the imprint of your restraint. Because what she felt with you wasn't chaos, it was safety, and that safety is hard to find again in a world full of noise. She'll realize that the very silence she thought meant indifference was actually peace. The peace you once offered her freely, which she mistook for weakness. So now, when you look back, you understand that silence was never about revenge. It was about revelation. It revealed who valued you and who only valued your effort. It revealed the difference between attachment and love, between ego and emotion. It showed you that the moment you stop chasing what isn't yours, you make space for what truly is. You've become stronger, sharper, and calmer, not because she changed, but because you did. You learned that love doesn't need to be proven through constant contact. Sometimes it's proven through distance. And the irony, now she's the one overthinking, the one wondering, the one hoping you'll text first, while you've already moved beyond that need entirely, because you've realized that silence isn't the absence of communication, it's the loudest statement of self-respect. You don't chase anymore, you attract. You don't reach out anymore, you receive. And in that stillness, you finally found what every man truly seeks. As more time passes, your silence begins to evolve into something sacred. What started as a boundary now feels like a philosophy, a quiet reminder that not everything or everyone deserves access to you. You start realizing that silence isn't just the absence of communication, it's the presence of understanding. It's where self-respect lives. Because when you don't chase, when you stop explaining, when you allow people to feel the loss of your energy, you finally create space for your dignity to breathe. You no longer live on emotional autopilot. You no longer bend your values for temporary comfort. You finally understand that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And the most powerful moment in a man's life is when he learns to let people miss him. Because when you give silence instead of reaction, you force others to face the consequences of taking you for granted. Your quietness becomes their loudest wake-up call. Meanwhile, she's learning that same lesson in reverse. At first, she thought she had endless chances. She assumed she could pull you back anytime she wanted, with a text, a photo, a hint of affection. But now, her tricks aren't working. The power she thought she had over you dissolves the moment she realizes you've emotionally detached. It's not just that you stop texting, it's that your energy no longer seeks hers. That terrifies her more than anger ever could, because anger means you still care. Silence means you've moved on. She can feel the difference in the way your name no longer lights up her phone, in the way you stopped orbiting her world. She starts realizing that losing a man's effort is one thing, but losing a man's emotional investment is something else entirely. That kind of loss doesn't hit immediately. It creeps in quietly, day by day, until it becomes regret too heavy to admit. You see, what most women don't realize until it's too late is that a man's silence doesn't come from nowhere. It's built over time, through repeated disappointment, ignored boundaries, and one-sided effort. It's the product of moments when you cared more, tried harder, and stayed longer than you should have. Every unanswered text, every dismissive tone, every subtle act of disrespect stacked up quietly until one day, your heart just shut off. And when that switch flips, it never turns back on the same way. You don't hate her, you don't even resent her, you just stop needing her to understand you. That's what makes your silence so powerful. It's not fueled by bitterness, it's born from acceptance. It's the sound of a man who's realized his peace is more important than being right, and his self-respect is more valuable than her attention. And while she's out there trying to fill the silence with noise, dates, distractions, validation from strangers, none of it works the same way. Because what she misses now isn't your words, but your presence. The way your energy felt calm, grounded, safe. The way your voice carried certainty when she was chaotic. The way your silence never meant disinterest. It meant thought, depth, control. Now that you're gone, she's surrounded by men who talk too much and mean too little. And that's when she starts to understand. Real masculinity doesn't chase chaos. It creates calm. Your absence becomes the benchmark she compares others to. She might not text you. She might not admit it out loud. But every time a man fails to make her feel the way you did, she thinks of you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. And in a world full of noise, realness echoes the loudest. Your silence doesn't just affect her. It starts shaping your future relationships too. You approach everything differently now. You no longer rush connection. You no longer mistake emotional intensity for compatibility. You've learned to listen more, observe more, and speak less. You've become selective, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Because now you understand that not everyone deserves access to your emotional world. You've learned that consistency is the purest form of attraction. Not words, not promises, but steady, quiet presence. And because you've mastered silence, you've mastered self-control. You can walk away at any sign of disrespect, not because you're heartless, but because you finally understand your worth. You don't need closure from others, you give it to yourself. You don't demand validation, you generate it. You've become the kind of man whose silence speaks confidence, whose composure demands respect. By this stage, your silence has turned into something magnetic. People sense your discipline without you ever mentioning it. Women notice it immediately. The way you're unbothered, the way you don't chase, the way you move like a man who's not easily shaken. You've stopped trying to impress and started embodying peace. And peace for a masculine man is the most attractive quality there is, because peace is rare. It's powerful. It's the sign of a man who has conquered his emotions instead of being conquered by them. And when women sense that, they don't know how to handle it. Some will test it, trying to stir reaction. Others will respect it, drawn to the calm they can't create on their own. But either way, your silence commands presence, because it's rooted in self-mastery. You're no longer the loudest voice in the room. You're the one everyone listens to when you finally choose to speak. She'll come back eventually, maybe months later, maybe when you least expect it. Her message will seem casual. Hey, how have you been? But behind those words lies an entire storm of emotions: guilt, curiosity, nostalgia. She's reaching out not because she's sure of what she wants, but because she can't handle the weight of not knowing where she stands anymore. And here's where the ultimate test begins. Because in that moment, you'll feel a flicker of old emotion. You'll remember the good times, but then you'll also remember the peace you gained through silence. And when you weigh the two, peace will always win. You'll realize that silence didn't just change her, it changed you. You've learned that sometimes, the greatest form of love isn't giving someone another chance, but letting them live with the consequences of losing you. That's not cruelty, that's growth, that's evolution. When she finally sees that you've moved on emotionally, it'll hit her harder than any argument ever could, because nothing devastates a woman more than realizing she no longer has emotional influence over a man who once cared deeply. She'll replay the moment she dismissed, the times she ignored your efforts, the days she made you feel like you were asking for too much. And then she'll realize that all you ever wanted was loyalty, effort, and presence, things she gave too little, too late. That realization breaks her more than heartbreak ever could, because losing you wasn't about losing a man, it was about losing a mirror that once reflected her best self. Now, every time she tries to recreate that feeling with someone new, it falls flat, because no one else carries the same balance of care and composure that you did. That's the cost of underestimating a man who knows his value. As for you, your silence has become your identity, not as a defense mechanism, but as a form of leadership. You've learned that real men don't waste energy convincing others of their worth. They simply walk in it. You now understand that the best way to command respect is to stop chasing attention. You've realized that peace is louder than noise, that stillness is stronger than chaos, and that silence, when rooted in self-assurance, becomes a language of its own. Every day you prove it by how you move. You're no longer explaining what kind of man you are. You're showing it through how little you need to be understood. You've mastered restraint in a world addicted to reaction. You've become rare, not because of money, looks, or status, but because you've mastered yourself. That's the foundation of true masculine power. Control over your impulses, your emotions, and your words. So now, when you look back, you finally understand why silence was necessary. It wasn't about her. It wasn't even about getting her back. It was about rediscovering yourself. It was about realizing that love doesn't mean losing your identity. It was about remembering that peace is the ultimate form of power. Because at the end of the day, she might still think about you, talk about you, even regret losing you. But you've moved into a higher space. A place where silence is strength, solitude is clarity, and peace is priceless. You no longer text first because you don't need to, You no longer chase because you become the destination. And the truth is, once a man learns to be content in silence, no rejection, no absence, no woman can ever control him again. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's freedom. And freedom is the one thing a high-value man never trades away again.